Communication, EBC, Eagle Broadcasting Corporation. Ito ang Radyo Agila. DCEC 1062 sa Mega Manila, DWIN 1080 sa Northern Luzon, DZEL 1260 sa Southern Taga, DYFX 1305 sa Visayas, DXED 1224 sa Southern Mindanao. Ito ang Radyo Agila. Mabilis, malakas, pumapagaspas.
Pasya ng bayan, babantayan, tututukan mula sa simula hanggang sa resulta ng halalan. Bata ng Halalan 2025! Subaybayan sa himpilang paborito ng bayan, Radyo Agila.
Mga bagong kaalaman sa siyensiya at teknolohiya. Alamin sa programang Pinoy Scientist. Tuwing Linggo, alas 5 ng hapon hanggang alas 6 ng gabi. Pinoy Scientist. KBP Best Science and Technology Radio Program. Pinoy Scientist. Dito sa Radyo Agila.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat ng mga tagapakinig ng Pinoy Scientist. Dito lang po sa Radyo Agila, DZEZ 1062. Welcome sa ating ika-4 na episode ng Lakbay Kinabukasan. Ito po ang kauna-unahang programang pangradyo sa bansa na tumatalakay sa futures thinking, agham at mga bagong ideya para sa maunlad na bukas. Ako po si Dr. Custer, ang inyong kabarangay Pinoy Scientist, at nais ko ring batiin ang aking partner, Professor Sherman Cruz. Nasa saan ka man? Ang ating Pinoy futurist na kasalukuyan po ay nasa biyahe ngayon mula sa kanyang bakasyon, kasama ang kanyang pamilya, subalit nakikinig po siya sa atin dito sa ating talakayan, at siya po ang may contact at kaibigan na ating magiging guest mamaya. At nakikita na po natin siya sa screen. Ngayon pong hapon ay pag-uusapan natin ang isang napapanahong tanong. Paano nga ba dapat mamuno sa panahon ng artificial intelligence? Ang titulo po ng ating episode ay AI in Leadership and Organizational Management. Today's organizations are navigating in an era of exponential change, and we have artificial intelligence being pervasive as a tool, but also as a force that will redefine leadership, work, and management of organizations. So with us today is someone who is globally recognized for helping leaders and institutions make sense of that future. We are deeply honored to welcome Dr. Elisa Farrow, an award-winning Australian futurist, transformation strategist, speaker, and executive coach. Founder of About Your Transition. She's a trusted advisor to boards and organizations across sectors. Dr. Farrow believes in a world where AI serves people, not replaces them, and where foresight is grounded in compassion. Tara na, simulan natin ang isang makabuluhang pagtatalakay kasama si Dr. Elisa Farrow. Welcome to Pinoy Scientist, Dr. Elisa.
Thank you so much. I'm really appreciating this time with yourself, Custer, and looking forward to having a good conversation over the next period of time with you.
Well, thank you. We are this is the first Features Thinking program in the country, and we'd love to tackle about giving future strategic foresight insights to our listeners. So, let me start. You've spent decades helping organizations navigate change, and perhaps we're facing one of the biggest transformations in organizations, which is the adoption of AI. So let me begin with this. In your view, what does it mean to be future-ready leader in the age of AI, and how different is that from the kind of leadership that we were taught in the past?
Great first question. And I'd like to just acknowledge the fact that this period of time that we're operating in at the moment is a disruptive time. We've got a lot going on globally. In terms of being future ready, the first thing that I'd like to say for any people in leadership positions, and even those who aren't in leadership positions but aspire to leadership positions, is to be curious about what artificial intelligence will actually do. In my doctoral research that I concluded in 2022, I came up with 6 different characteristics of leaders of the future. And some of those are relevant to today's practice. Others are a little bit quirky, a little bit different, because I feel that in time, organizations as we know them will be different, where there will be a human to AI or automation ratio, which will challenge even the way that we assume that the human will be the leader of the future. And that sometimes makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it means that in the future, we need to be very ready to redefine what makes good leadership, but also what the differences will be in the future about concepts to do with power and structure, and how we can still design strategic approaches where maybe even though we could automate a new process or a solution with artificial intelligence, should we? So I encourage leaders to start to be curious, but also to not just blindly follow the trend, thinking that, well, AI will be an incredible efficiency provider. Maybe there's some parts of our value proposition as an organization we don't want to change.
You mentioned about different framework of leadership from your work. So how different is that from what we know of leadership in the past before AI
Mm,
revolution?
mm. Well, I think prior to the AI revolution, or use your word, leaders were considered excellent if they could ensure that they provided clear vision,
Mm-hmm.
clear purpose, key focus on value creation, depending on the industry they came from. And in particular, the best practice leaders prior to AI amping up or becoming more common in operating models of organizations, leaders need to be heavily reliant on other internal structures, processes, procedures, ways of working,
Mm-hmm.
where those ways of working now with artificial intelligence are being challenged. So, what might have been a process of design or validation of a particular service quality, for example, in the future, that will involve artificial intelligence for certain systems and processes. In the past, and even in some industries still today, that validation, that checking, that assurance was done by humans, like whether they be consultants contracting into an organization, or whether they be other parts of the organization that did some of those necessary checks and balances. So leaders of the future will essentially start to consider how artificial intelligence, smart algorithms will actually
Mm-hmm.
enhance their leadership decision-making process, to make decisions that are potentially far-reaching in terms of impact than maybe what they could have done prior to AI becoming a part of their technological architecture in their organization.
So let's flag it that AI will change the decision making process. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll just have to ask first. When we talk about leaders, at the bottom of the hierarchy usually is technical skills, but the topmost hierarchy in leadership quality will really have to be ethics, compassion, and being connected with your group or organization. So,
Mm.
in terms of leaders embracing AI, how do you ensure that leaders will remain grounded on empathy and ethics, not just on efficiency?
That's a great question, and something that I'm really passionate about is to make sure that in many organisations, the way executives, senior leaders are rewarded, if you're in a
Mm-hmm.
private sector organisation, for example, compared to government or a charitable organisation where maybe, the idea of a bonus is not so strong, that we need to actually start to factor in those considerations as part of the way that we measure performance. So
Mm-hmm.
this might mean the performance of their division, team, or organisation as a whole, but also the characteristic of the leader and the person, so that in these times of change, where artificial intelligence is at this stage not necessarily ready. To
Yes.
be able to bring in that emotional, strong, ethical frame. So, leaders in particular need to keep human, but also put in the right, let's call it a control framework to make sure that there's always a human in the loop of the process around decisions, especially if they affect someone's access to a service or potentially someone's ability to engage. With that process. What worst case scenarios are where people just blindly accept what's coming out of their AI algorithms without ensuring that they know where the data is coming from, what the algorithms are meant to be actually providing in terms of answers or clarity of the parameters around those utilizations, and also make sure that they sensitively manage the emotional response, not only in themselves, where their
Mm-hmm.
leadership value proposition could be being challenged, but
Yes.
also others in their teams.
So when if you need to decide using AI, you need good data. So what is the prerequisite of coming up with good decision activities as a leader, a good data infrastructure within the organization? Is that correct?
It's certainly a big part of
Mm-hmm.
making sure that we can trust
Mm-hmm.
the decisions that and the information that comes out of artificial intelligence is to know where the data is sourced from. And at the moment, for example, even if people have played around with artificial intelligence in non-work based contexts, a lot of the information that they think might be contemporary 2025 practice may not actually be. And some of that data, which has been created by people that might have a bias in their thought process, may actually mean that even some of the coding behind AI solutions is actually not fit for purpose. It may not include equitable considerations. It might have a bias towards a particular type of person, where they're from. So leaders in particular need to, in my view, be adapters first. And leadership as a context over time is going to mean where in the past I had a trusted human advisor.
Mm-hmm.
In the future or futures, I may have a trusted AI advisor.
Oh,
But it still means at the moment the human needs to, due to legal reasons at the moment, in Australia anyway, where I'm based, you can't have an AI bot making a decision on someone without, at the end of the day, a human validating and vetting that decision.
but if you have
It's crazy, but
AI,
this is futures
yes.
thinking at its best, right, Custer?
Yes,
Like
if you
when we
have.
think of futures, they can be preposterous or they can be actually plausible. Some organizations already have on their governance boards and senior executives, they say, oh, what would ChatGPT think about this? And run that scenario through an algorithm and see what it says. Do you think the likelihood of success is strong? What have other people in the world done? So the AI advisor, people are already getting this now in their personal life where they ask Siri, or if they an Apple user, like, oh Siri, what do you think I should do?
You see, but we're talking here about empathy, compassion.
Yeah.
So, do you think that the AI is somehow capable of giving quality advice to leaders?
I, well, I think over time, definitely. And I still always, I might say definitely the possibilities there, but then I still think that what the biggest risk that I feel is a concern for leaders, organization, just people like parents of kids
Mm-mm.
is that ability. We don't want to lose our ability to make meaning for ourselves. And if we hear something and we go, oh, like that feels a bit wrong. It could be a gut, the gut feeling, or it could be something that's in our heart. We might go, oh, that doesn't feel too good. We've got to trust that. We've got to trust it and follow the threads, and then determine whether or not there's other ways that we can do that due diligence and checking to make sure that it will happen. Like as a funny example, Custer, I was using a AI solution the other day to do something, and here it's Easter time, and everyone's sort of thinking about the meaning of the occasion, and I said, oh, to the AI solution that I was using, I said, oh, and have a great Easter. And there was a response that came back that said, thank you, like, thank you, and I hope you get some chocolate. And I took a photo of it because I thought, oh wow, this is amazing. But because already some of these AI solutions and tools are being tuned to actually understand what it's like, what it's all about. It was really quite quirky. And so when we're thinking about leadership and compassion and trust, the more AI comes across, especially in some of the large language models, comes across as a bit human, like a bit funny or a bit quirky or acknowledging a public holiday like that, or a religious holiday, the more people will go, oh, it's not too bad.
So it boils down to prompt engineering.
Yeah, yeah. The data, the source of the data,
Mm-hmm.
the prompt engineering, but also something that is beyond my understanding. I'm a social scientist. I'm not a technologist, but I chose in my research to look at artificial intelligence and the implications from a futures lens on organizations. That it's about algorithms, it's about the actual design and coding, it's about the trusted checks and balances that are encoded within the solutions, it's about the mindset of the programmer and who created it in the first place, because they would have had some form of agenda, hopefully to make the world a better place, but they may not have. So, for us as leaders in organizations, if we're really wanting to think from a perspective of keeping compassion, keeping the planet at the heart of the value proposition, yeah, we've got to make sure that we feel that we're curious enough, we've got enough confidence, and trust, but we also know that at the moment AI is sort of exploding, but let's make sure that we feel that before we actually make it change someone's life forever with a decision that could be a yes or a no or a
Mm-hmm.
this or a that, if it's a healthcare diagnosis, for example, that we have ways to validate that the AI itself was designed in an ethical way. And there's groups around the world that are working on those sorts of software and AI development standards to make sure that you get an ethical approval. But not everyone will be wanting that. There'll be some parts of the world now we know are not in everyone's best interests, and they might be super competitive, or they might be actually sort of bad for us. So we've got to just still be curious. We've got to learn about artificial intelligence, but not get rid of the human in the loop yet.
I'm just curious. If a president of a country could use the AI, would they decide on the same policies? Anyway,
Yeah, maybe not. It
yeah.
depends if they have a futures focus, which I know this radio shows all about, futures thinking. Like we've
Mm-hmm.
got to think not just of the immediate implications of a decision. Like we've got to think of, well, what are the potential longer term implications of a decision, and then go there or not.
Yes. Uh,
Mm.
Well, Drucker said the best way to predict the future is to create it. So, how do you suggest leaders in terms of deciding or designing organization to be not just reactive to AI, but intentionally be shaped around it?
Mm. Yeah, one of the parts of my research did build um, an AI adoption strategy
Mm.
process, and one of the findings that I unearthed in my doctoral research was the very much silo-based strategy formation that happens in organizations. So, they might have a strategic plan, like a longer term strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, they're 3 to 5 years. They might have a sub strategy. Maybe it's a customer strategy or an automation strategy. They might even have a workforce strategy or a cultural development strategy. But often those strategies are built in silos. So you have the CIO or the Chief Information Officer or Chief Technology Officer working with key stakeholders to define a technology strategy, but they're not actually incorporating other forms of strategy into that. So that,
Mm-hmm.
for example, if we choose to shift our software architecture to incorporate, let's say, 50% of all of our solutions will have an AI embedded component to it. It might be a hybrid type
Mm-hmm.
model. What does that mean in terms of the efficiency dividends that may come from process efficiency, service being done 24/7? What does it mean for the human resources? And they often are not saying, well, let's shape the organization of the future that we want for our brand, and then going back to think, well, what's the technology we need? What is the human and cultural components we need? What's the infrastructure we need?
Mm-hmm.
What's the learning and knowledge component? That target operating model of the future organization is not often typically identified. So then people are making strategic decisions, often involving millions of dollars in terms of funding, in a bit of a vacuum. And for me, I strongly encourage leaders to make sure that they think of what the future state of that organization as a whole is, and then incorporate, well, where and where do we not want AI to be?
You are a consultant for organizations, so how do you break down those silos?
Hmm. I think partly the biggest component is I usually start any process with hopefully finding willing senior people in an organization. Like if I am asked into an organization and people are really skeptical or they just
Mm-hmm.
think it's another strategic planning activity, I have to sort of reshape the expectations, because as you would appreciate, Custer, when you do futures thinking, and you and Sherman have probably done lots of fun things together like that, you suddenly see the light bulbs go on for people, and they start to realize that, oh my gosh, like, this inability to dip even a toe in the water, like in the
Mm-hmm.
future state, is actually costing us. And so what my process is usually very much a co-design process. It's involving senior leaders, but also senior influencers from within the walls of the organization. And if they're really willing, we expand that circle to influencers who might come from different industries, allied industries, groups that, if we think about it, that they don't even appear on paper to have a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, but when we bring those groups together, we can suddenly sort of think about, the futures in very different ways, because we're using different people's perspectives, people with lived experience of the common scenario. And that's the work that I love the best. I think about the adaptation approach with a guided, an ethical lens always, from my perspective, experimental ideally,
Mm-hmm.
but it's got to be placed in the ecology of the organization and then the broader environment. So how I might manage a project with the company in Australia would need to be changed if I was to do one in the Philippines, because in the Philippines versus Australia, we've got different forms of national sovereignty, we've got different layers of governance, we've got
Mm-hmm.
different social and political items. So you can't like cookie cutter approach. So for me, it's always thinking, where am I in the world? What's going on in the broader context? What's this ecology of the organization actually going to be like, their operating models? What's the culture currently like? What's the willingness of leaders to engage actively to break down these silos? And then what is the approach, which is, tried, trusted, evolving via insight. And it's also empathetic because change is hard, right?
The
It's hard.
organizations, yes, the organizations that
Mm,
you've worked with who adopted the strategic plan that infuses AI in leadership,
mm.
how did it change the organization?
Well, I think that one of the first things that in the organization that I'm thinking of,
Mm-hmm.
that it changed the organization by them realizing that they needed to cut their own path. That in at the moment, a lot of AI stories, there's a lot of stories out there in not only academic literature, but everyone's got a blog or a
Mm-hmm.
podcast talking about these processes. So to sort of boil down to the process of what's the broader industry that this company might be part of, what are they doing, where are they maybe getting benefits in other global contexts from artificial intelligence, but what would fit the purpose within the place that they existed. And for some companies, and one I'm thinking of is an aged care association working with some older people. They originally thought, oh, we could have like robots delivering pills to older people, or we could have a robotic cleaner, or we could have a nurse that sort of speaks to you your pathology or what you need, or an entertaining robot or something like that. And then they thought about it for a while because they're all scenarios that are
Mm-hmm.
plausible, could happen if you had the funds to sort of create that environment. But then they thought, well, that doesn't align with our mission. And for them, this particular aged care association had a strong Christian basis to the way that they worked. And they realized that there were some things in the back office that they would be very happy to incorporate AI in. But the actual warm hand, the warm heart, the ability to have a human to human contact, especially in the sort of more nursing sort of side of things, they thought
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to sacrifice that.
So it also
Yeah,
boils down on the key performance indicators
yeah. Key
and how.
performance indicators, but also for them, they were a listed company, what their shareholders would accept. And part of it is about growth and economics, but then part of it was thinking, well, we can actually demonstrate that we're still, despite the move of some other competitors towards more of, well, we're streamlining our processes and here's the efficiency, the things that mattered the most to them from their models of care and practice, they didn't want to affect.
And more than that, it also builds the innovation and reputation of the
Yeah,
organization,
yeah,
which is very important when you deal with a lot of stakeholders and
yeah.
customers.
Yes, and depending on, this is where for me it's thinking about the concept of the ecology of the organization. So who's working there? Who are they serving? What are the values and the drivers? What is it, a service organization or is it a profit-driven organization? What are those measures of success? What are the regulations that might mean that there's certain things that have to push in a certain direction? Banks or the financial industry in Australia went through a big change recently where there was a commission of inquiry organised, and they realised, well, that banks have to change or they will be out of business. And
Mhm.
in the future, some organisations, I believe, will actually be in business more because they'll maintain a component of the humanness in the areas where humanness is critical.
Y-
Automate some things, but keep the human in the humanness components that are the things that make people want to come to your organization because people will miss that.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so we talk about succession planning for leadership, but I'll give the time. Ang oras po natin ngayon ay 27 minuto makalipas ang ikalima ng hapon, Philippine Standard Time. Magbabalik po ang Pinoy Scientist at maya-maya sasagutin ni Dr. Elisa ang tungkol sa pagtulong ng AI sa pag-address ng leadership gaps sa isang organisasyon. Magbabalik po ang Pinoy Scientist.
EBC, Eagle Broadcasting Corporation. Ito ang Radyo Agila.
Tayo na sa iyo. Tayo'y magpatingin. Tayo na sa iyo. Sila'y eksperto at magagaling. Tayo na sa iyo. Inyong mata ang iyong mahalin. EO Executive Optical, ang practical. EO Executive Optical, ito'y practical. EO.
Ang pasya ng bayan, babantayan, tututukan mula sa simula hanggang sa resulta ng halalan. Bata ng Halalan 2025! Subaybayan sa himpilang paborito ng bayan, Radyo Agila.
Tayo po ay nagbabalik dito na po sa Pinoy Scientist at kanina iniwan natin ang ating katanungan kay Dr. Elisa, or I should call you Elisa, or how should I call you? Sorry.
Yeah,
Elisa?
I'm very happy for you to call me Alyssa.
Elisa, okay. Tungkol sa succession planning and human resource management. So how can AI help in terms of finding better leaders who are adapted to AI, better employees in an organization so that the organization can thrive in this AI-led era?
Mm, mm. Well, there's many industries being taking the opportunity with artificial intelligence, including the human resource and recruitment industry, and where artificial intelligence is used as even a form of like first level scanning, or as a way of providing sort of interview prompts, etc. It's something that in some circumstances might mean that if the algorithms are not exactly wired in a way that's appropriate, it might do a first pass, but it may miss people that would be actually providing really great value in an organisational context, an organisation of the future. So so that partly those processes where for me, utilization of AI in recruitment and selection processes is one process. I'm a staunch believer of making sure that there are appropriate checks and balances and validations. People are even finding that different forms of interview are now required to make sure that people are not just reading a script if they're on a virtual interview, for example, that they actually can be creative, they can actually be able to communicate effectively, they can actually work as a team, and they can work with complexity as key functions. And for me, if I'm trying to recruit a leader in the process, I'm of course looking for experience. I'm looking for clear skill sets. I'm looking for the core capabilities, but I'm also wanting to make sure that they're a good fit for the context of the organisation, its culture, and where the organisation ideally is moving towards.
A typical leader who is good with AI in terms of getting wisdom from AI tools, how would you extract that information if you're doing succession planning for the next leader for an organization?
Well, I think it will mean that some of the components of a leader's CV, if it is more process orientated or leading teams who have been process orientated, it will mean that we will potentially have leaders who are leading hybrid teams where there'll be humans, but there will also be AI agents as part of that process. In the future of organizations, you may always also have AI agents who are leading other AI agents, which starts to get your head spinning a little bit more about the future and who is the leader. So for me, it's making sure that we, again, from a leadership perspective, can set strategy, set vision, set checks and balances. We can lead with compassion. We can lead with ethics. And certainly that we have the ability to pivot if we need to. If we need to flex in a different direction, we need to keep an eye on the broader market that we may be operating within. And that might mean that we'll need to be more, to coin a phrase, like agile in our disciplines, a bit more thinking long term but acting short term in more experimental loops, to make sure that our teams are provided agency so that they can get on with the job, but to make sure that the quality and the expectations of what good looks like are clearly understood by everyone. And by everyone, I also mean that expectations of quality are understood by any algorithm that might be part of the team.
Is there a North Star that these leaders can look up to when they, let's say, how do they maintain emotional intelligence in a fast-paced AI transformation, especially when ethical ambiguity would arise?
I think the North Star would be making sure that people realize that they're not alone in their leadership journey, that the best leaders that I've ever worked with have a mentor or a
Mm-hmm.
coach or a trusted circle, that they can validate or check in on ideas in a safe context. It's not a career limiting move to sort of go, oh, could I just check this through with you? I've been a change partner and a change advisor to quite a number of senior leaders in organisations where the benefit is just having a sounding board, and they probably have the answer, but they just want to validate it. And I'm not saying, yeah, great idea. I'm checking on their thought
Mm-hmm.
processes. I'm sounding back to them about what they've had. I might point them in direction of new insights or new literature or new case examples. But at the end of the day, regardless of how good the advice is, the leader in themselves has to feel like that they're a whole person, that they're a whole leader, and that they know what their limitations may be, in a loving way, challenges, but they also know the areas that might be their primary strengths. And for me, I do regular self-reflection and encourage any leader that I'm coaching or working with closely, to make sure that they do that reflection as well. And it's not just about the head; it's about the heart as well, and the sort of gut set sort of part of the process. And just to, if you can't feel that you're remaining grounded, go
Mm-hmm.
somewhere where you can do that, and that might mean time in nature or time around pot plants or plants that bring you joy, or time in a flower shop, just something that actually reminds us that we're actually part of a greater, we're human, but we're part of this planet, we're nature.
Can you give us an example of maybe a real life example of a leader who employed AI and came up with very good decision that otherwise would have been not so good?
Mm, yeah, I think.
Any business decision that a person or a leader took based on an advice from an AI advisor.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of quite quirky sort of stories is that a person who I know personally, they were finding themselves struggling with keeping focused.
Mm-hmm.
They had too much work on their plate. They were finding it difficult to um, navigate through. It's starting to have an effect on their health. It was
Mm-hmm.
starting to have an effect on their family. And one of the ways that they used artificial intelligence was just around scheduling. No, it sounds really simple, but just around, what is the optimal schedule that would mean that I'd still be able to be efficient in my practice, but also make sure that I have time for my family. And part of the use of AI was just almost as as a critical friend, where they were they told AI quite deeply the story of what their situation was in terms of the amount of stress they had, the amount of
Mhm.
work they had, and said, what would you do? You know, they just spoke to the AI instance exactly like what you would do to a friend, a close friend. And and this leader told me that the guidance that they got just calm them down. The AI algorithm provided them a number of scenarios, a number of processes that they could follow. And what my friend and the senior leader mentioned to me was that the fact that it confirmed the fact that they did have too much on their plate. They weren't just feeling a little crazy. And they actually then took some advice over. This is where I came in a little bit in terms of saying, oh, structure, you know, a bit more of a structure around a coaching approach. And so they tried something different every day for a month period. So 30 days roughly. Every day they tried something slightly different, even if it was a wellness thing for themselves, or if it was a structure or scheduling thing in their work, or whether it was actually realizing that the staff members who were meant to be supporting them may not have necessarily been given the best expectations. So, you know, little tunes and shapes,
Mhm.
and then they would be updating AI on a regular basis as well, just to say anything else, or what do you think about this? And that for them was like when a human wasn't available to have a conversation with, they started this almost like a relationship with their AI, and felt that they got a bit of peace with that process.
I I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I I'm actually preparing my entire staff for a one full
Yeah,
day meeting because we have a deadline. We have a
yeah,
one month deadline to finish this work, and we're probably 20% done.
yeah.
Only 20% done. So like, okay, I'm gonna ram you to the wall, but I'll ask AI tonight after this.
Yeah. I always Custer always also just validate, and I did this with one of my clients the other day where they've got a deadline too, but they've got 50 days, and I was on a call with them. I was a sounding board for them, and I opened the diary and I flicked it over and said, oh well, you've actually got 50 working days to get this finished. And it was like, oh gosh, 50 days. But then when I said, well, do you actually know what using an agile phrase, minimum viable product is? Like, you know, because we could all be like, oh, it's got to be perfect. It's got to have the cherry on top of the cake and, you know, look really beautiful. But does it have to? You know, because I think that whole notion of what a minimum viable product is in agile project management, for example, is a really helpful thing in normal life, where sometimes you think, well, I'll still get the benefits I'm looking for, but it doesn't have to be like the sort of Rolls Royce option to get from A to B. Maybe a bicycle is fine to do the same job. But let's make sure that we then as a team know where are we being blocked, where are the opportunities where maybe we can move forward faster. So as part of your conversation with AI tonight, maybe you could say, do a bit of a force field analysis and determine what are the enablers and what are the blockers, and then have the chat with the team and maybe reprioritizing the work slightly. But that's me pretending to be AI for you, Custer. You'll have to report back how it went.
But that's a very good idea, actually. You can enforce agile management using
Mm,
AI and map out the entire process, know what are the dependencies, where are your challenges, and
yeah.
perhaps AI can help, untangle some of the things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes because this is the bit where in some circumstances AI will be handy for those
Yes.
people who do get very, you know, like I'm very passionate about the work that I do, but I know that sometimes I may delay
Mm-mm.
because I'm really, oh, like how's that going and how's that feeling? But AI just cuts through all of that and just says, oh, blah 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 blah, do these things over the next 30 days, and you're going, oh gosh, like almost like the friend that you have who is very practical, versus the friend that you have who's quite emotional, and both are beautiful in their own way, but sometimes you need the super practical process orientated person, and other times you just need the warm hug from the person who's the more emotional sort of side of things. So yeah, especially when there's a deadline.
But I
Yeah.
don't see that a little bit. You need a lot of conversation with AI to achieve that. So are there tools that are somehow tailor suited for leaders, project managers using AI so that it can help plan, it can help develop strategies in
Mm.
agile management?
Yeah,
Or
there
are we
are.
dependent on DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and Jenny AI?
Well, I think now that AI is starting to be incorporated into everything, including
Mhm,
Zoom meetings, who can transcribe immediately afterwards, and is that a number of project management methodologies
mhm,
that I'm familiar with, and project management software products are starting to use AI smarts as part of those processes. But I would start often with some of the more easily accessible options. But then I always have the rider that I don't put anything into Claude or ChatGPT if it's confidential,
mhm,
because at the moment for me in my work I don't have a corporate license, which means that the information is purely mine. So there's dangers if you were to, for example, cut and paste a file that is confidential up onto those software packages, because it goes into someone else's
yes.
cloud storage. So this is the important component around leadership as well, that we could do it, but we have to make sure that we invest in a secure service. That means that we're not going to essentially sell our intellectual property or give it away just because some silly person has just cut across a status report into an algorithm and said fix the grammar. It's
Mhm.
gone then. It's gone. And who knows where it's gone to, apart from the owner of that AI solution, which is typically offshore.
So you talked about the data infrastructure and
Mm,
confidentiality, data privacy. So
mm,
what are the investments that companies must take so that leadership management will be better AI enabled so that it will drive key performance indicators for the company?
I think organizations in today and in the
Mhm.
future won't be able to necessarily afford or access their own AI team of human super clever people who know how to leverage the
Mhm.
solutions. Programming is becoming easier due to some of these AI solutions, where people can build code now really quickly with the help of artificial intelligence. But for me, if I was an organisation, I'd want to make sure that if I have anyone involved with cyber security, that cyber security is also extended to the utilisation of AI within the organisational technological architecture. And I would want to make sure that if I am using a system, that I actually understand what their checks and balances and
Mhm.
controls were when they actually went into designing the solution. And that would become part of my procurement methodology as a leader, would be saying, I'm not just going to buy off the shelf. I'm going to maybe buy off the shelf, but I'm going to have a big criteria that is about what's the proof to see this, where this data is stored, how were the algorithms tested, have there been examples of any biases in the process, and if all of those answers are it's all fine, you'd feel a bit more confident that you're not going to have some major disaster.
Today, we're seeing a lot of companies adopting AI. So, what do
Mm.
you see in the next 5 years the ecosystem would be?
I think for me, in the next 5 years, I think that there will be more organizations where there will be uh, types of organizations
Mhm.
where there will be less human and more AI within them. And this might just be in niche services, but there'll be organizations that will be owned by a human, of course, due to legal requirements and regulation. But then it may be AI agents working with other AI agents. And so there may not be many humans as part of some operating models of the future, but in other industries, there'll need to be more humans who will actually look after that assurance process, the checks and balances that I mentioned earlier, but also the maintenance and some of that more, let's call it VIP customer care. In my doctoral research, I set all my research 20 years in the future, which was 2040, and I used Professor Sahel Adetula's 6 pillars that he created with Dr. Ivana Milosevic. And that was a really awesome process also because it meant that there was a toolbox of different approaches to sort of look at a problem or statement
Mm-hmm.
in and unpack it, not just like causal layered analysis that you would know well, Custer, where you'd sort of think not just at the litany level, not just at the headline level, but going down into the worldviews and the metaphors. So the people that create this technology, create organizations of the future, need to be really clear on what is the worldview that's driving their future organization. And in some circumstances, there might be the need in the future, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, to actually have the VIP service in an organization's fully human, but the budget option is AI. So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
potential. But at the moment, most of us will be working in this sort of human augmented by AI context.
And will it be a competitive edge of companies that they be driven by AI, their management, the leadership?
I think there certainly needs to be in some industries a competitive advantage of artificial intelligence, but making sure it's the right form. Because if we, for example, a company invested in AI without doing the validation and the due diligence, and then it became bad, like AI, that made bad decisions that hurt people or hurt the planet, it could be terribly disastrous for an organization's bottom line, as opposed to an organization that does a sensible, thought out, strategic approach looking at the areas of their ecosystem that they would like AI to be a key part of versus those areas where they may not
And what
want AI.
industries will be prioritizing this? You see in the next 5 or 10 years? Will it be the
Yeah.
banking sector? Will it be the marketing sector, production, manufacturing?
Yeah. Well, manufacturing already has had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
automation as part of that process. Resources, so mining and resources, they've already for some time been using automated machines as part of those processes in the dirty, the dry, the dusty, sort of
Mm-hmm.
dangerous workloads. AI will become more and more prevalent in service orientated, more, let's call it white collar sort of type workplaces. But then clever tech will also start to be incorporated within construction industries, depending on the location and the type. So 3D printed houses, for
Mm-hmm.
example, is something that people are starting to experiment with. But we'll start to see it more and more. We've got our smartphones. It's already listening to us. We can already use this and get any answer. My niece can ask her Google Home device to play any song that exists in the world. Um, and I've told her to say thank you, which she wasn't doing, and she is now. And Google Home is appreciating that, I think. So we've got to just, any industry could be majorly disrupted, but it's those process orientated industries, the ones that have, you could almost map out in a neat mathematical line, because AI is essentially clever maths that coming together combined with other forms of technology, robotics, etc. That's where the power will come. Cross domains, AI. But yeah, there's a lot of shifts.
But how about government, public institutions? Do you see that? Do you see AI augmenting, integrating it in the leadership of government officials?
I think there is certainly
Or is it unethical?
no, well, this is the big question, isn't it? About I think we'll probably see in government, and I'm using Australia as a reference, somewhere AI is starting to be incorporated in
Hmm.
service delivery, key service delivery, key processes around surveillance and validation, being
Mm.
used to fight crime. It's being used in public hospital systems about diagnosis of healthcare results and pathology and x-rays. There'll be more of that start to come through. So the leader will need to be conscious of that process, and leaders will need to be able to navigate that complexity. As I mentioned earlier, like they have to be the adapters first. They have to demonstrate AI curiosity, but also they have to make sure that they're having the necessary decision making processes that mean that we're not going to break the system before
Mm.
we're ready for a, a reliable replacement to these processes.
So we only have few more minutes left. So I have one last question before I ask for your final message.
Hmm.
What would you tell a CEO? One piece of advice about AI in terms of leadership and organizational development. What would it be?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I would give to a leader is that artificial intelligence can be, at the moment, it's good or evil. It can be something that we could see to be incredibly beneficial, but it can also come with costs. And so for me, there needs to be a relationship built between different segments of and different industries, technology companies, healthcare organisations, government organisations to work together to ensure that there is a joint goal around using these technologies for empowerment of humanity as opposed to purely a profit driven approach. I believe best practice leaders of the future will ensure that they do not have a purely individualistic perspective or economic profitability lens, that they will also have a more collective, ethical, and humanitarian focus in the future. So it's the rise of sustainability thinking, ESG targets globally. AI could help with solving a number of world issues, company issues, but it needs the mindset to be ready to embrace that, and that's what leaders need to be a mindset that is beyond purely the bottom line economics, and get those performance indicators that actually are about the good of
Mhm.
the people and the planet, not just about profit.
Thank you, Dr. Elise, for putting compassion on top of the menu for AI for
Mm.
organizations. So, atin pong nasagap ang magandang mensahe mula kay Dr. Elisa Farrow. At maraming salamat. Thank you very much, Dr. Elisa, for joining us today on Lakbay Kinabukasan. Your insights on AI, on leadership, compassion, ESGs, on being a humanitarian leader has really inspired a lot of us. So thank you
Mm.
very much for
Thank you.
this wonderful interview.
Thank you so much. And feel free, the listeners can reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop me a line if anything prompted a thought bubble for you.
Uh, Thank you. And as
Thank
you know,
you.
as technology evolves, I think our humanity will also need to evolve. We need more
I
empathy,
believe that.
courage,
Hmm.
and care.
Yeah. Which
Sa
is a
atin,
good message for Easter as well, Custer. Thinking about,
yeah,
that's family time at the moment, people listening
yes,
in.
definitely.
It's important to keep the human connectedness strong.
Yes. Sa ating pong mga tagapakinig, maraming salamat po sa inyong patuloy na pakikinig, pagsusuporta sa ating programa. Naway ang ating talakayan ngayong araw ay nagbigay po ng bagong pananaw kung paano tayo mamumuno sa ating mundong na binabago po ng teknolohiya. At sa huli, isang tanong ang nais nating iwan sa inyo. Sa mundong pinapatakbo po ng datos, paano po natin masisiguro na tayo mamamuno na gamit hindi lang ang utak kundi ang puso? Ito po si Dr. Coster, ang inyong kabarangay Pinoy Scientist na papaalala, ang hinaharap ay hindi hinihintay, ito ay hinuhubog. Magsimula po tayo ngayon. Magkita-kita muli tayo sa susunod na linggo, dito lang po sa programa na kung saan ang siyensiya ay buhay. Maraming salamat po. Thank you, Dr. Elise.
Thank you.